So hello everyone. This is the first video I'm going to do for Ketogains. And as inauguration, we have today Menno Henselmans from Bayesianism.com. Hello Menno, how are you?
Hey, my pleasure to be here. I'm great.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your approach in Bayesian bodybuilding?
Right. So I'm the founder of Bayesian Bodybuilding. And Bayesian refers to the use of statistics from a person called Bayes. And it's the result of my education and my background, because it's not like most people in the fitness industry. I started off working as a business consultant, and I had my training in behavioral economics. So I focused on economics, psychology, and statistics. And I implemented that and applied these methods that I learned, which is a very scientific and evidence-based approach, to what I call Bayesian bodybuilding. And the difference with most other evidence and scientific approaches is that a Bayesian approach is more about decision-making. So Bayesian reasoning involves using the science and looking at the data, looking at the evidence, but it's also a rational method to form decisions. So it's more practical than science, which often comes to the answer, we need more data, we need more research, or it could be this, it could be that. We don't know with absolute certainty. Bayesian reasoning just comes to the conclusion, based on the available data, this is what you should do.
Perfect. Well, as you know, we on Ketogains also follow very similar methods. We started the group practically to try to demystify some of the classic myths, in a way, that's around ketogenic diets, that calories don't count, that you can eat as much fat as you want. So we're practically on the same ground, and this is why we are such big fans of yours. So this brings us to the first question we have, that also is like a prevalent myth on the keto community, regarding calories don't count, and that if you eat too little, you will end up with metabolic damage because you've been eating so little calories, and that people should not, especially women, eat below 1,200 calories, a magic number that everybody seems to throw about, but nobody knows where it came from. So what is your take on these two things, the starvation mode, metabolic damage, and the magic 1,200 number?
Right. I think you're spot on in saying that basically the number one problem or myth with ketogenic dieting is that calories don't matter. They absolutely do, and then people wonder why they're not losing fat, because they're in ketosis, they should be losing fat, whereas being in ketosis means that the substrate your body's using for energy is fat. It's fat oxidation levels, so fat burning is really high. But that doesn't mean that you're actually going to be losing net body fat mass, because you're also consuming a large amount of fat. So it's still the balance, which comes down to energy balance, that determines whether you're going to lose body fat over a period of time. So if you're in a caloric deficit, the body adapts. There's no way around that. Your body always strives to achieve homeostasis, and these adaptations during weight loss, they include a slowing down of your metabolism, a decrease in energy expenditure. So there are a few pathways by which this occur regardless of what you do. For example, a lower body weight intrinsically means that you're a lower basal metabolic rate, because that's based on body mass. You also burn less energy throughout the day just walking in the gym, because you have a lower body weight. If you eat less, this also decreases the thermic effect of food, because that's basically the energy your body expends to digest the energy you consume. So you eat less, TEF goes down. All of these factors, they decrease your metabolism, but it's a small effect. On top of that, we have something that's a lot more interesting, and that's called adaptive thermogenesis. This is basically becoming more conservative of your body during periods of energy shortage. And that manifests mostly as a decrease in what's called NEAT, or SPA, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or spontaneous physical activity. It's just the moving around, fidgeting, bobbing your head, even entirely subconscious movements that you do all throughout the day. So you become a bit more robotic, a bit more efficient in your movements. And there are also a few pathways which aren't even related to movement or anything at all, which just involve your whole metabolism becoming more efficient so that it saves energy and it doesn't expend too much needless energy, because energy is scarce during that period. Now, there's nothing you can do about this, and if you maintain a lower body weight, this will mean that your metabolism will be lower. There's just no way that, assuming the same lean body mass, same lifestyle, same everything else, at 100 kilos, you're not going to have a higher metabolism than at 80 kilos. But the question is, does this adaptivity remain if you get back to 100 kilos? So you're 100 kilos, you lose a lot of weight, you're at 80 kilos, you have a six-pack, and then you bulk back up, or you just mess up and you yo-yo diet, you're back at 100. In assuming the same body composition here, so same lean body mass, for the sake of the example, is your metabolism lower than at 100 kilos than it was before at 100 kilos? That's what we sought to investigate with my research team. We've done a study on this, a review paper that's currently in the process of being published. We looked at various angles on this, where we sought to determine whether we could find basically an imbalance between measured and predicted energy expenditure, so basal metabolic rate. And we looked at anorexics, which was a really cool idea from Anastasia Zinchenko, the lead researcher on this paper for my team. We also looked at malnourished populations. We looked at bodybuilding case studies that dieted down to contest prep and were followed afterwards to see what happened to their metabolism. We looked at the classic Minnesota starvation experiment and similar experiments like Biosphere, a few other experiments that basically got a group of people to lose a lot of weight, gain it back, and then looked at what happened to their basal metabolic rate. And basically the conclusion from all these angles was that regardless of situation, if you come back to the same body composition, your metabolism will be back up to exactly the same level. So, and if you think about it, this is really logical if you've coached a lot of competitors, because if there was really something like metabolic damage, you would expect that every bodybuilding contest basically, or physique show that you do, you end up destroying a bit more of your metabolism. And you know, if you're looking at a pro competitor with 30 competitions under his belt or her belt, then you know, the prediction would be there's nothing left of that guy's or woman's metabolism. So the truth is that it's usually the opposite. Usually if someone becomes more experienced and during the second and third shows, they find that, you know, they're doing things a bit better and they can keep their calories just a bit higher than last time and still reach the same level of leanness or even better conditioning than before. So, you know, with this in mind, it makes a lot of sense that you're not slowly decreasing your metabolism every time you go through a cut period or a weight loss period. And it's reassuring to know that even with crash dieting, malnourishment, anorexia, contest prep, which are probably the most extreme cases of weight loss I can imagine at least, then even then, you know, you're not doing any damage to your metabolism. And another good thing, because basal metabolic rate is intrinsically strongly related to thyroid hormone functioning and related to how much thyroid hormone your body's producing.
Okay.
A nice example of that is that unlike, say, with testosterone, where you have the problem as a male that if you induce testosterone in the male body, then natural production shuts down, and eventually your testes, your balls, they die because they have nothing to do, so they atrophy, and at some point they die, which is why you get all the jokes of steroid users not having any balls. But with thyroid hormone, there's not this problem that the thyroid dies off. So what we see in people that are on thyroid medication, even after years, if they stop the medication, thyroid starts functioning back just exactly the way it was before. And it's very, very robust to any kind of damage or however you want to call it.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's very much what practically destroys the metabolic damage myth that is prevalent in mostly all fitness communities or everywhere where you see people dieting. So what's your take then on the magic 1,200 number that everybody throws about? Do you know where it came from?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen that number 2 in certain communities. I found that with myths like these, often it's a specific kind of community where that number circulates. You can often trace back the origin even to a certain forum or online forum or something like that, certain coach. I think it's just something that someone started at some point and it's been replicated. And probably also because even though it's a completely arbitrary number, I think it makes sense in that I too don't want my female competitors, which is basically a scenario that you're talking about here, to go below about 1,200, even ideally about 1,500 calories on their training days. So not because of metabolic damage or any such thing, not even physiological concerns, simply because it's difficult to get enough nutrients in below that caloric intake. So then you're better off at least considering cardio and increasing energy expenditure in other ways instead of decreasing energy intake to progressively cause more fat loss. And B, you simply get problems with hunger, satiety, your meals becoming practically small, and it's needless suffering often.
Okay, so I actually did a little bit of research to find where that number came from. Mm-hmm. And what I got is very much in what you are saying. It's a myth that came from an assumption, mm-hmm. from studying a book from Catch McCardle. They developed the basal metabolic rate formulations. Mm-hmm. What they got is that they suggested that the average for females at the time where they made the studies was about 1,800, 1,900. That were the suggested calories for the average American female. Mm. Then when you apply an extreme caloric deficit, let's say 30-40%, the least calories a female of that frame should be eating would be around 1,200. So that's where the myth came from. It started propagating, and it's not like a small framed woman, let's say a lady that is 5'4", that weighs probably 250 calories, should not be eating less than that. She probably could, only in context, because if she ate about that, she would not be losing weight. And if she ate less, it would not mean that she would be screwing up her metabolism.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, you talked about being efficient in energy. So here's one thing that I've been experimenting on myself. As you know, I've been doing ketogenic diet for practically over 15 years now. And what I found is that the more I do ketogenic diet, the more efficient my body becomes when using fuel. So I recently had done a BMR test where it was suggested that my actually caloric maintenance levels were about 2,600. And if I exercise it, which I do for about 1 hour, 2 hours a day, powerlifting, I would need about 3,000 calories, which for me and my reality is a little bit insane, because I really maintain perfectly with about 2,000 calories. And when I need to cut down and lower my body fat, I have to actually eat about 1,300, 1,200. So it's it struck me very up. And when I talk to some doctors and researchers that are very in tune with ketogenic diets and metabolic efficiency, especially in mitochondria, there is a theory that a ketogenic diet is very efficient in regards to energy. So your mitochondria can do more with less. And this brings us to the recent study that did Nusi and Kevin Hall and Gary Taubes, and where they say that there is no real efficiency or advantage for people who do a metabolic damage. What do you think about what I just said regarding energy efficiency and the Nusi study?
Mm-hmm. So you mean the study where they actually went in ketosis, right? Not the one before that?
Yeah, the one he recently published on a video that they practically say there is no real benefit of doing a ketogenic diet, or there's really no advantage in it, as some people say. What is your take on that, and what is your take on energy efficiency?
Right. Overall, that study fits with what we knew, and that study actually showed that the initial period of a ketogenic diet, sometimes known as keto flu or keto adaptation, that this period is actually accompanied with metabolic inefficiency, which could be considered a good thing. But in this study, it was likely because the body was using more protein as substrate for fuel because it was not yet fully keto adapted, and it did not have the glucose from your normal carbohydrate intake. So when you're going low carb, protein is still relatively high, and you're not yet keto adapted, so the body's not yet using ketones as fuel, then you come in a situation, at least for a few days, or this study suggested it was about 2 weeks, probably depending on how hard you go into ketosis, then your energy expenditure actually increases a bit because of the metabolic inefficiency in converting protein to carbohydrate. However, afterwards, this is almost certainly a temporal thing, because we also have other research that also showed that the decrease in nitrogen balance during this period, afterwards, actually you get more positive nitrogen balance. And we have other research, especially in relation to thyroid hormones, because there was this idea that low-carb dieting causes lower T3 levels, which is basically the most important thyroid hormone. But they found that in spite of this, which it's true that you get lower T3 levels generally, in spite of this, resting energy expenditure is not different in people when they're in ketosis or outside of it. Now, it's possible, especially in your case, that if you've been in ketosis for so long, you're simply in a state where we have no research of whatsoever. So it's possible that your body has become more efficient and you have a lower resting energy expenditure because of this. I personally doubt it. I don't think you would see a major effect like this. It's not what any kind of research has found, and it's not really, I wouldn't say you actually have a lower resting metabolic rate because of that. It's likely because you are very lean and you've maintained this condition for a long time. That's simply in combination with your genetics. This is simply your basal metabolic rate at this body weight and this fat percentage. So I don't think you're at risk of lowering your metabolism with long-term ketogenic dieting. I think that will be permanently fine. There are, however, mostly based on anecdotes from doctors and a few other colleagues and coaches that I have, that have found that certain people, when they go low carb, they develop thyroid disorders. So most people don't, but it seems that a few susceptible individuals do fall in this category. And I've seen this in people too. It seems, interestingly, in my clients, that there is a correlation between people with thyroid problems and people that want to do ketogenic dieting or have done so for a long time. So there might be something there, and I think it's definitely worth investigating your thyroid hormones if you suspect this is the case, in which case you want to look at free T3, free T4, and thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. Yeah. Those are the three most important things to test.
Yeah, it's funny because I also recently did a test on that, and they're practically within normal parameters. So, well, as you say, it's let's hope some more research comes along in the future to see where this leads out. Because also what I've read is practically the same line as what you just said. There are, of course, some down regulations, but it doesn't mean that you may be affected. You might be asymptomatic, and it's very much in line probably that you are very much more efficient. So because it's really normal. In a way, ketosis is like a starvation mode in a way, meaning not a starvation per se, but it mimics fasting. It makes your body more efficient in a way why it was made up. Right? Like that's the necessity of ketosis. It makes your body efficient burning fat, so you can get save for later. Like it's an adaptation process.
Yeah, I think evolutionarily, it's true that ketosis is a metabolic response, basically an adaptation that humans developed to cope with starvation better. Exactly. But then people take this and they say, okay, if you're in ketosis, that's starvation mode, so it's going to be hell for your muscles, and that's confusing, semantics, just the term with an evolutionary causative factor, which has nothing to do with muscle hypertrophy or anything.
Exactly. Great. So then we just talked about it a little bit. What is your stance on fasting? And how do you think it applies to someone who is doing a ketogenic diet? Can they both be done together? Are they supposed to be done together, or will they work better together? And then for someone who is following training or, let's say, sports performance and is doing also a type of ketogenic diet, would you suggest fasting or in any way, or some applications in that case?
Mm-hmm. Right. So based on the research we have, there isn't any interaction between fasting tolerance or ketosis, but that's basically because we don't have any research. So theoretically, and what I found, my experience and anecdotally in my clients, is that during a ketogenic dieting or during a ketogenic diet, your tolerance to fasting is a lot better. You're a lot better. Energy levels are a lot more stable. You're better at coping with irregular meal intervals, which makes sense because of what we just discussed. Evolutionarily speaking, your body is now in a state where it would be expected to cope well with shortage of energy and irregular eating intervals. That said, I don't think you'll get any kind of magical effect from this. It's mostly a psychological thing, that you just don't get the same kind of mental problems with fasting that you otherwise sometimes get. And that's basically also the main thing with intermittent fasting. If you're talking about intermittent morning fasting, it's mostly a psychological tool. So this, just like ketogenic dieting, under most circumstances does not affect protein balance, your metabolic rate, thyroid hormone levels, insulin sensitivity, any of those things. But I think it's become a bit hyped, and there are a few serious contraindications of using fasting, intermittent fasting. We now have several studies actually that showed that intermittent fasting resulted in improved or worsened carbohydrate tolerance, such as decrease in insulin sensitivity, increased fasting glucose levels, which is kind of funny because most proponents of fasting say that it's great at developing these things, but that's because they look at research where people lose weight, and regardless of how you lose weight, you get healthier, and that will almost universally improve insulin sensitivity. But if you compare the intermittent fasting with a group that does eat breakfast, and you're looking at overweight individuals, then you'll often find that the overweight individuals, they have better responses in terms of glucose and insulin control, what I call carbohydrate tolerance, basically overall. And that actually results in less fat loss. And it's not really sure how much of this is due to compliance with the diet, which is a psychological factor, or actually nutrient partitioning and energy expenditure. Probably both. So that's a contraindication. Overweight individuals, especially obese individuals, if you have a suspect that you have low carb tolerance, might not be great to do very long morning fasting. Anecdotally, and based on very limited research, women don't seem to tolerate fasting as well as men. So that's another thing, but it's mostly duration, because fasting, if you have dinner at 6, like take super average Joe, dinner at 6 p.m. and breakfast next morning at 8, that's a 14-hour fast overnight. We don't call it intermittent fasting.
But it's fasting.
Right. Whereas if they have their pre-bed meal at 12 at night and they only eat again at noon, that's only a 12-hour fast. But then we say that person is intermittent fasting. So it's often also just semantics, whether you call something intermittent fasting or not. Another contraindication is very high activity level. There are a few studies that, some cross-sectionally, and one found that also affected appetite, but at least these studies suggest that fasting can impair activity thermogenesis. So basically, it can result in you not increasing your energy expenditure as much when you are active. So they may trigger a certain kind of efficiency, as we just talked about in adaptive thermogenesis with weight loss.
Okay.
We also know that pre-workout calorie consumption, especially protein, compared to fasted training, will increase energy expenditure. So this is something along those lines, which is why generally I wouldn't recommend intermittent morning fasting or fasting in general during a period of very high activity. Other than that, in most situations, whether you do intermittent fasting or you do have an early breakfast, doesn't have a lot of consequences.
Okay. Yeah, so like they say, the number, that some of the numbers doesn't alter the factors, right? As long as you get your nutrients right, your macros in, it's like the least important of all the pieces for nutrition. Because there's also, when you see on internet forums, people talk about fasting, and also very much in hand with ketone levels, for example. There's like a race to see who has the highest ketone levels. And then there's a race to see who has been fasting for more time. People think that, for one, the higher the ketone levels, the more fat they're going to burn. And then they think that, as well, the longer they're doing the fast, the more fat they're going to burn. But they have no regards whatsoever to actual calories. They keep having sticks of butter or drinking bulletproof coffee to be in deeper ketosis. And then they fast for 24 or even 2 days together, especially women that are very nervous, and they think, oh, I'm dropping my ketosis. I have not enough ketone levels. I'm not in true ketosis. And then this is all like the things that we try to fight, because overall they're not going, for one, going to be healthy, and for two, they're not really going to do nothing in regards to body composition. So thank you for bringing this up. So keeping in line with ketogenic diets, as you know, there are 3 main types of ketogenic diets: standard ketogenic diet, the targeted ketogenic diet, and the classical cyclical ketogenic diet, or carb night, or called by many names. So what do you think about each of them, and which one would you suggest for someone who is doing strength training or powerlifting, body recomposition, etc.?
Right. So the idea behind cyclical ketogenic dieting was, is the audio working? I think I heard a bit of an echo, but if it's fine,
yeah, it's working. Yeah.
All right. The idea behind cyclical ketogenic dieting was that you can sort of get the best of both worlds, but I think actually you often get the worst of both worlds. So the idea was that you still have the carbohydrates, you carb load during a certain period, and you have those carbohydrates and they stay within your muscles. And you still get the benefits of ketosis as well. The problem is you don't really need those excessively super compensated carbohydrate stores to begin with. And during the period where you're basically just before your next carb load, and while you're not yet in ketosis, you're in this state of what most people experience as keto flu. And there's a study by, I'm not sure if Volek was involved, I think so, but also University of Tampa, hasn't been published yet, so take it with a grain of salt until it is. But they found that body composition results and performance were worse in people that carb loaded on the weekends compared to a continuous ketogenic diet. And I think that a ketogenic diet is, for many people, you go in hard or you don't do it. Because this phase where you're only in very, very light ketosis, or you sort of go in and out of ketosis across the day, you don't reap the benefits of keto adaptation, so your body doesn't become fat adapted and reliant on ketones as fuel. And you also get the problem of impaired nitrogen balance that we've seen in a few studies now. So that's probably bad for muscle growth, because you're basically teaching your body to use protein as fuel and convert it to carbohydrates, which is absolutely not what you want. You want your body to use the protein as a building block for muscle growth.
Sure.
So in line with that study and the research we have showing that keto adaptation can occur and will keep on occurring for several weeks, possibly even months, before you reap all the benefits and you are fully keto adapted. Your body's completely used to using ketones as fuel. So if you don't stay in ketosis, you don't get those benefits. And you also don't get the benefits of the carbohydrates, because your body basically doesn't need them in the first place, and it gets you out of ketosis. So you're sort of permanently in limbo, where you're sort of inducing constant keto adaptation in yourself, as opposed to reaping the benefits of this new physiological state. We don't have any other research on this that directly compares it, so it's still a bit up in the air, but the whole benefit that you might get from it, which is the other side, we've discussed the downsides, benefit would be that you have fuller glucose stores or glycogen stores. You don't really need that, because resistance training across, I think, at least over 20 studies have found that even bodybuilders doing super high volume training, they only deplete muscle glycogen stores by 20 to 40%. So there's no point in trying to get to that 100% level, because what we've seen in most research, Volek showed it in high-level cyclists, that even during full ketosis, fully ketogenic diet, glycogen stores still stabilized at around 70% of storage level. So 60-70% is what I've seen generally. And that's plenty to fuel a resistance training session. Now, this is where targeted ketogenic dieting comes in, for the scenario where you might get that extra edge from having a bit more carbohydrates pre-workout. And I think some individuals may benefit from this, even though theoretically it shouldn't be needed, even if only psychologically, and because it will allow you to increase your carbohydrate intake while still reaching the same level of ketosis, because your pre-workout, you're consuming those carbs and they'll be used as fuel, and they won't get you out of ketosis. So even if only for those purposes, I do like having a bit more of the carbohydrates of the day during a ketogenic diet, pre and post workout, because then they'll be put to good use and they won't interfere as much with ketosis.
The classic earn your carbs.
Yeah, exactly. It's also psychologically nice for that reason. You earn your carbs. And I think that's also one of the biggest mistakes. One is, what, like you said, not respecting thermodynamics, not realizing that calories still count when you're in ketosis. Number two would probably be also what you touched on, basically, chasing ketosis instead of fat loss. So it's confusing the means and the end, the classic bureaucracy problem, basically. Ketosis is just a means to induce an energy deficit. And it's not the goal. The goal is the actual fat loss.
Exactly. I'm glad you touched again on this, because I don't know if you follow many low-carb forums or boards all around, especially on Facebook, but as it comes throughout the years, I've seen a change of types. Now, before you were looking at people just chugging butter sticks and chasing ketones, and now I hope that we have made a little bit of a difference. We are seeing the message spread around that it's not ketones per se that matter, but actual body recomposition. Like we just say, are you chasing ketones or are you chasing fat loss? Which one do you want? It's the same that with women, that they pursue certain body weight when their frame should not be at that body weight. Like they want to be 120 pounds. Mm-hmm. They should never be that weight. Even when they reach a certain body recomposition, they can end up weighing 140 and look way better than when they weigh less. So yeah.
Yeah, a good example of that is if you look at my weight over the 14 years of training or something, then I actually reached almost the highest weight I've ever been, or for a long time in that period, after my first year of training. And then when I was 87 kilos, but, kind of chubby-ish, a bit too much of dreamer bulking. And in the next years, I basically didn't reach that level again until 10 years later or something. And I've basically been spending about 10 years just recomping. And now I am about 90 kilos, so only a bit heavier than that. And that's kind of the condition I can maintain year-round with a six-pack. So in terms of actual weight gain, it's like you could say that I've only progressed or barely progressed at all since my first year, but the difference in physique is immense.
It happens the same to me. I've maintained around, let's say, 72, 76 kilos all around my bodybuilding career. I've never went, the most I weighed, as I think it's 78 kilos. And as you say, it was a little bit over 15% body fat or so. But exactly, my weight has been practically in line, but I've changed my body composition completely.
Yeah, I think this occurs for most people. Basically, every time they go on a cut or a weight loss diet, they're a bit more successful last time. You can often you find in people that they get a bit leaner every time they sort of reach a new PR in terms of body fat percentage, and then they bulk up a bit more. And over time, you see that they get leaner during the cut periods, and their average weight stays sort of the same, but they recomp, at least for natural trainees, of course, because you're talking about very different weight possibilities of gaining weight when you're talking about the non-natural kind of athletes.
So you would suggest then that for someone, let's say, who is recomping and doing heavy strength training, to add a little bit more carbs, for example, maybe a targeted ketogenic diet approach in regards to when if they want to build more mass or more muscle.
Yeah, I would probably recommend it in almost any case. If you're doing strength training or any kind of activity, well, I'm not expert on endurance training, so I'm not going to touch that. But in principle, for high intensity strength training and sports, you can always get a bit more carbohydrates, at least pre-workout, probably also post-workout, because you'll be able to consume more carbohydrates, and it may just provide that little edge in performance.
Sure.
So I see very little reason not to do this, but you're talking about, for example, having meals that are normally 10 grams of net carbs and 15 grams pre and post workout. So you're not talking about carb loading or refeeding.
Yeah, the classical 100 carbs pre and post, just like probably you're going to be or end up at around 50 at most, which is perfectly for someone on a ketogenic diet, and even more if they're pretty lean. I don't know if touching on this, if you've seen the recent what happened on Tour de France, that supposedly the first two places were done on low carb ketogenic diets. I think they were Vespa athletes, if I remember correctly, with Peter Dafty. He was training them, and we are getting the first athletes that are winning competitions doing a low carb approach. So I hope this sparks more research in the field.
Yeah, definitely. We do have the research from Volek that showed that wasn't really that well controlled, but it did show that people during endurance training, cycling kind of training, they gained more lean body mass when they went into ketosis, and their performance actually increased. So we also have some of that research, the train low, compete high kind of idea, that you're in ketosis, or you teach your body to compete with very limited carbohydrates, and then you carb load up right before the show. I haven't read the research to see if that's actually really beneficial, but I think that the two zones where ketogenic dieting can shine is pure strength training and very explosive sports, powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, and the actual very endurance-oriented kind. Because when you get to that middle area in terms of anaerobic performance, but still very endurance-oriented, like a soccer match or a repeated sprints kind of activity, then you often fall in the category where glycogen needs are very high in a completely different level, and it's probably not possible to reach a level of keto adaptation where you can compensate for that.
I agree perfectly. Yeah, me as a power lifter, I've seen it myself on that I've been, as you said before, getting leaner year after year, but my PRs, especially on deadlift or squat, are improving. And the benefit, the most benefit I've seen in my case is that I can get to a lower weight class, but with more power and more strength. So I don't have to go all bulky like the other guys. I just have raw power and also look better.
Yeah, that's another benefit of ketogenic dieting for strength sports that also I'm implementing with some powerlifters. You go low carb, even if you don't go fully keto, going low carb in the days before the show for a powerlifting or something, you don't need that glycogen storage. So you can get 2 kilos of weight loss from just the water and glycogen often, sometimes much more, and it doesn't affect your performance at all. So you can get basically that same amount of extra lean body mass going into the same weight category.
Exactly.
And that's a huge advantage. Those 2 kilos of extra muscle will be infinitely more beneficial than that 2 kilos of water weight.
Exactly. And then we have the nocebo effect that you talk about, right? People think that they need actually carbs to be better. And you have to break that mental barrier that you really don't need them.
Yeah. I think carbohydrates and energy, indeed, the main distinction and where a lot of problems occur is confusing psychology and physiology. Because, like you said, we have the research showing that giving people carbohydrates and asking them beforehand if they think they need them. If they think they don't need them, there's no effect. But if they do need them, they induce a nocebo effect where they perform worse if they don't have them. So it's basically a self-fulfilling negative prophecy whereby you become reliant on the carbohydrates and going low carb. And one of the reasons, this is one of the reasons I recommend that most people experiment at least with a ketogenic dieting is you free yourself from this belief. And it also, will completely change your way of looking at a diet and think of your food choices, improve your cooking skills because you have to look at a lot of different recipes and ways to combine your macros and meals. I think it's definitely something almost everyone should at least experiment with. And from what I've seen in the industry, it's the people that have never actually themselves tried a ketogenic diet who are most vehemently opposed to it
Exactly.
for any kind of use, basically.
Yeah, the exactly what you said. What I see on the fitness industry right now is, for one, like the fear that ketogenic diet might become more prevalent or popular, which I really don't see anything bad at all, because for one, the ketogenic diet we propose is more so like a paleo diet, and not being a paleo Nazi, but more so a whole food approach that could naturally, for some people, throwing you in a state of ketosis because you're eating whole foods. You're not relying on over processed foods. So in this regard, what could you say to the audience? Some tips or some of the things you've seen people do wrong when doing a ketogenic diet?
Yeah, so we touched a bit on this. It's you still want to respect calories. You still want to track. If you're tracking your macros, which is very likely because at Libitum ketogenic dieting, it's very difficult. At least you want to track net carbohydrate intake. And of course, you get the big problem of it being so easy during a ketogenic diet to, if you're not paying attention to your calories at all, to just eat half a kilo of cheese or something or bacon. And that adds up enormously fast in terms of calories. So you probably want to track all of your macros and more strictly so than during non-ketogenic dieting. That's number one. Number two is don't chase ketosis, but chase fat loss. In fact, I would go so far as to say that for most people, you don't want to minimize carbohydrate intake. Rather, you want to find the highest possible carbohydrate intake you can consume while still being at your desired level of ketosis. And for most people, it doesn't take a very deep ketosis. Like usually arbitrarily 0.5 millimolar is the cutoff. It's completely arbitrary, but it's a level that for most people, they get a nice appetite suppression effect, more stable mood, sometimes more clarity. And going deeper, for many people, not everyone, some people do, they react, it's like the deeper they go, the better they feel. But for other people, they go deeper, but there's no additional benefit, and it just restricts their diet. And that's the next thing. Why you want these carbohydrates is because you still, like you said, call it paleo, call it whole foods. I think it's silly that people, they demonize the paleo diet, and then they say, what should you eat then? Yeah, whole foods. Well, it's like saying the same thing in different words. So all of these approaches converge on the same kind of foods usually. Although paleo does have, the nutty, avoid all dairy, avoid all fruits kind of groups, but still you have that in every kind of circle. So you still want to have your vegetables. You just want very low carb vegetables like mushrooms and greens. In terms of fruit, you're probably limited to strawberries or like very fibrous fruits, or you'll be eating very low amounts of them. And the goal is not to, eat bacon and eggs. The goal is still to eat healthy whole foods and have Also for your meals, because your meals will be a lot more awesome. You can eat more food, better satiety. You still want to get your fiber in. There's no reason a ketogenic diet will absolve you from the benefits and the requirements of dietary fiber, which is why people complain, I went keto and now I'm constipated. Has nothing to do with ketosis. It's because you went from 50 grams of fiber a day to 5, and your digestive tract doesn't like that.
Yeah,
so,
there's also a theory in that regard that, sorry for interrupting, there are lots of zero carb groups that also do a type of ketosis where they converge both diets, that they say that fiber is not really needed. In a way, keto per se is a low waste diet. They say the less crap in, the less crap out, of course. So it's also suggested when you go on a low carb diet or a ketogenic diet, even if you do not ingest enough fiber, you should increase your magnesium intake and of course your sodium intake, and this will help with mobility in regard to food bolus.
Yeah, it's like, I think if fiber, you could say, though not as extreme, it's like sleep. You don't really need to sleep, but you'll feel a lot better if you do.
Probably, yeah.
It's like that with fiber. And indeed, we have, there's a famous case study of a guy or a couple guys that lived on just meat for 2 years or something, I think. And, they lived and they said, I was doing okay, but, looking at their health parameters, things could be better. So it's not recommended. Simply because you don't need it doesn't mean that you can't benefit from it.
Sure.
Same with vegetables and everything. I think magnesium is tricky, and a lot of my keto clients supplement it because it's just you're limited to the food sources that have a lot of magnesium in a keto diet, and you want to get enough magnesium, just like fiber. You still need the magnesium, and you need quite a lot of it, especially as a strength trainee. So it's simply a matter of total intake as well. Sodium is interesting. I don't really see that in any of my clients, but I do hear it from a lot of other people. And I think the problem is not that ketosis makes it difficult to consume enough sodium. I think it's more that people are still terrorized basically by the you have to limit your salt intake idea. Because I think RDI is 2 grams or something of salt, which is next to nothing.
Yeah.
As a strength trainee, you need a good amount of sodium. And I have literally, I think, okay, with one exception, I've looked at blood works of dozens, maybe hundreds of people in my career so far, a lot of them in ketosis. And it is so exceedingly rare to find someone who eats a whole food diet and has excessive sodium levels or not enough potassium. Sure. If you just eat sodium by taste and you get your potassium in, your body is very well equipped to handle that. Just like first, if you go by first, and research has found this even in many kind of marathons and endurance kind of events, forcing yourself to drink more does not result in improved hydration status compared to just going by first. And actually, especially for strength training, the risk of excessive water consumption so that you don't have enough sodium is a lot greater than the risk of getting too much sodium. So, sodium's awesome. Eat it. It's healthy. It makes your food taste better. Use it. Yeah,
there's very much in line with the campaign against saturated fat. There's a campaign against sodium worldwide. Here in Mexico, they even forbid restaurants to put the actual salt shaker in the tables. What we suggest on the Ketogains board is that we follow very much what Bullock and Finney suggest. That if you feel lethargic and tired, it's not that you need carbs, it's probably that you're very low on sodium. Mm-hmm. And we've experimented, especially with people who do lots of sports, to try to have a bit around 2 grams of sodium before training. And it, for example, in my case, and people who do powerlifting, it makes a whole lot of difference. Probably, I don't know if it's a placebo effect, like you said, but there is a difference in regards to actual fatigue or perceived fatigue.
Yeah, it absolutely can.
Exactly. And when people who are just starting ketogenic diet and are, getting the keto flu, feeling tired, lethargic as well, ingesting a little bit of sodium, we even made a beverage that we call the Keto Raid, which is basically is mineralized water with a little bit of probably lemon or cucumber, depending on the taste, with sea salt, a little bit of magnesium, and really doesn't have potassium because, as you say, potassium will be probably ingested on ketogenic diet by itself from meats or avocado or greens. Mm-hmm. And people who drink this beverage throughout the day, they probably, as you say, a placebo effect, but they do feel better and they don't seem affected by lethargy or keto flu. So yeah, I think the main issue is probably people under consume salt, probably in any diet whatsoever, whatever diet they may be doing, and overly processed foods, they may have a little bit higher sodium by themselves, but when they go back to whole foods, probably they don't get enough.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people also simply don't respect the benefit of sodium or salt as much in cooking as they can.
Yeah.
Basically, I'd say that with any kind of dish, unless you think it's already borderline too salty, if you increase the amount of salt in it, it will probably taste better.
Yeah, people forget about the importance of sodium, and I tell them, well, try to understand where the word salary comes from. Like salt has been important all throughout humanity. Even for a time, Roman wages were paid in salt. So you cannot say that it's not important for humanity. It has been like forever, since ever.
Yeah, that's actually what the Dutch, I'm originally from the Netherlands, became famous for, importing and transporting spices.
Okay, yeah.
So it's many other, the Norwegians, they were Vikings. And all these cultures have, the Romans and the Greeks and all these great empires. And we were great businessmen. Which is why you get all these sayings like going Dutch, it's splitting the bill.
Okay.
Even in Egypt, I was in Egypt a while ago. They know Dutch phrases like kijken, kijken, niet kopen, which means you go into a store and you look at everything. You're like, oh, look at this and this. And you inspect everything, but you never buy anything.
Like very much Dutch like Mexican. Mexicans do the same exactly. We look everything, we try everything, but we never buy anything when it's on sale.
Yeah.
Okay, Menno. Well, thanks a lot for your time. It's been an hour or so of great advice. It's been incredible. I think you cleared probably, if not all, most of the ketogenic myths. I'm sure this video will be making rounds in probably all the ketogenic forums. So thanks a lot for clearing all this up. I don't know if you want to add something else or say people, where can they reach you, your media outlets, etc.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure. I think don't really have anything to add. Like you said, I think we discussed all the big points, and this is indeed like a very good overview video for people that are interested in ketogenic dieting. I think we discussed the important topics that people need to be aware of, the big myths. If people want more information from me, they can go to my site, BayesianBodybuilding.com. My name, Menno Henselmans, will also get you there.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram recently, and I'm on Twitter. So whatever kind of social media you use, you can follow me there and check out my stuff and see if you're interested in more.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot for your time. I hope we can meet again soon. Come to Mexico. Let's make a seminar here. I think we could get you a full house.
Yeah, that's actually, I'll probably be in mid-America next year. So
okay, so we'll be in touch and probably I can meet you there.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks a lot.